An $11 million movie so different from current mainstream cinema that its director was sure it was going to flop. Behind schedule, over budget, and panned at a first screening for filmmaker friends, the young director chose to run away to Hawaii rather than attend the premiere of his own movie. And even when he was told that his fun, adventurous throwback to old movie serials of the 1930s and 40s was a huge hit with audiences, he said, "Let's wait and see how it does in the second week." But no amount of setbacks or self doubt could prevent George Lucas's personal pet project, Star Wars, from becoming one of the most successful and beloved movies of all time.
This is New York City independent guerrilla filmmaker Sean Weathers.
And I'm Canadian screenwriter and playwright Angus Combe. And for the next 2 hours, we'll be guiding you through George Lucas's groundbreaking, visionary science fiction film, Star Wars, as we try to figure out why so many people were convinced it was doomed to fail, and how it managed to prove them all wrong and become a $10 billion franchise that changed Hollywood and possibly the entire world forever. The No Rules Film School is now in session. I just have to say, I always loved that credit crawl there, that text disappearing into the distance. I thought that was so cool when I was a kid.
Yeah. Just the music, the Once Upon a Time, the text scroll. It's just a iconic intro to a movie.
It is. It is. And there's a part coming next, very soon here that was also one of my favorite moments in the film. I just loved it. And that's basically when the spaceships fly across the screen. And there's the first one there. And
The great sound in space.
oh yeah, I just couldn't believe how big this second ship was. I was in awe of this. And of
Yeah.
course, I think it's been parodied in other movies since then.
Of course, of course. I mean, a generation of people grew up on this movie. Multiple generations of people grew up on this movie because when this came out, it came out at a time where, VHS was starting to become like a huge part of filmmaking, where it's wasn't just the theatrical run, it was VHS. Even though we have VOD now, it doesn't give you the longevity that VHS did at this time.
That's
So
right.
this was able to stretch multiple decades and have the legs that films really can't have now because of the
Yeah.
competition and how quickly we cycle through things. So even another movie just as successful wouldn't have the longevity this had to affect so many different young generations that have this imprinted in their mind as a classic.
Yeah. Well, I just remember this movie played in the theaters for so long. It's like unheard of today. Like most movies come out and they don't last very long in the theater, and they move very quickly to other formats. But this movie, it played over a year in the theater. It just was a juggernaut week after week. And I knew people who said that they went to see it every Saturday for a year. So they saw this movie like over 50 times in the theater, which is mind blowing. Who would do that now?
I don't know. I hear about people going to the theaters multiple times, and it's always weird to me because it's so expensive. Unless you did what I was did when I was a kid, and this was a long time ago, where you would go to the mall, and when people exited the theater, you would hold the exit door, say, "Hey, hey, nice, have a nice day," and you would walk into the exit door and go watch the movie, or you would just pay for a movie and then just stay in the theater and watch multiple movies. But unless you're doing something like a knucklehead kid like I did, it's crazy to pay to see a movie multiple times like that. Of
Yeah.
course, here we have the iconic entrance of Darth Vader.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I loved Darth Vader as a kid. For some reason, I recognized him as the bad guy, and I certainly wasn't rooting for him in the movie, but I just loved him. I dressed up as him for Halloween. I had a poster of him on my wall. I had other toys, Darth Vader things. I don't know why. I was just obsessed with Darth Vader. I thought he was super cool.
Mhm. I think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously there was a lot that Lucas borrowed from in making these films. A lot of
Yes.
sources that, you know, you could say he paid homage to, kind of like what Tarantino says when he copies other people. I'm not copying their stuff, I'm paying homage to them. Yeah,
Yes.
he did copy a lot of things. Um,
Yes.
Hidden Fortress, film wise, I
Yes.
think is the biggest blueprint for this.
Yes.
I think he even wanted Toshiro Mifune to play Darth Vader at one
Yes.
point, and who obviously was, for those in the know, Akira Kurosawa um, influenced a lot of filmmakers of Lucas's generation, the film school generation, where they would just watch foreign movies, watch older movies, dissect it. Some would say copy it, but were influenced by it heavily. And Hidden Fortress was one of his films. Not even one of his better films to me. I mean, it is regarded as one of his better films, but for me, he made so many other films that were so much more superior. But it was a good movie, and the template for it is basically this: you had the two bumbling sidekick idiots. You had, the whole mission, and find the hidden fortress, the empire. It all syncs up as far as like if you watch both films, you'll see a lot of similarities. But I mean, I don't think it's ever been held against him in any kind of a way.
No. No, I don't think so. He wanted Toshiro Mifune to play Obi-Wan Kenobi,
Oh, you're right.
apparently.
It's not Darth Vader. You're right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
And the reason Mifune said no was that he was afraid that it would cheapen the image of the samurai. He wasn't quite sure how this was going to go over. He was suspicious of science fiction, and he just didn't want to do that. But that certainly would have been interesting if he had played that part.
Mhm. Yeah, you're
But
absolutely right. I was trying to go based on memory of what I remembered. And but yeah, you're right. I should have just looked up the
yeah,
facts, and yeah.
well,
But yeah, I know he
same
wanted him to
same
be in
idea.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, Lucas, his starting point was that he originally wanted to do Flash Gordon. He wanted to do an adaptation of Flash Gordon because he loved the old serials from when he was a kid, and he tried to get the rights to Flash Gordon, but they were already owned by Dino De Laurentiis, who was planning to do a version of Flash Gordon. So George Lucas was kind of depressed about it, but he eventually said, "Well, fine, I'll just invent my own. I'll do my own version of Flash Gordon," and that's sort of how he started writing Star Wars.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely a lot of different influences. The transitions, a lot of the stuff you see on screen can be tracked back to older things. So,
Yes, things like the wipes that he uses, very much from the old serials that he loved. Um, and the fact that he calls it Part 4 at the beginning there. He says it's Chapter 4, A New Hope. He's trying to make it seem like it's part of a serial.
so that's interesting. Is that something that he did retroactively, or when this movie came out, did it say part four?
I believe it always said it in the text at the beginning of the film, but he certainly didn't call it that. It wasn't part of the title, and that was retroactive. Once he knew he was going to make a whole series, then they started to title it Star Wars: A New Hope. But it was always called Star Wars, and honestly, he doesn't follow through. Like at the end of the movie, at the end of Star Wars, there's no cliffhanger, which is what there would have been if this was really part 4 of a serial. They would have ended on a cliffhanger, which they do more in the next film once they realize that they're going to make more than 2 movies. But I think he just thought it was a cute idea. He's going to call it part 4. He's going to kind of evoke the old serials, but it ends very satisfyingly. It has an ending. It doesn't feel like there needed to be any more. And I don't think he really thought there would be more,
Mhm.
in spite of what he may claim later that he planned out a whole series. I think he was surprised that it was successful. And I think he thought this was just going to be a one off movie originally.
Yeah, what do you think it is about this movie that hit a chord with people so much? Because honestly, I mean, I like the movie, but my favorite sci-fi movie is 2001: A Space Odyssey. And as much
Right.
as I like this, I don't have that passionate, you know, thing about this movie that a lot of people have, where it's a culture, it's a religion, it's a cult,
Yeah.
insert whatever, you know.
Yeah, well, I think again that was an influence on him. I think 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think Lucas admired that film and was trying to capture some of that in terms of the special effects. And I think that was a big part of it. The special effects were just so impressive for their time. People had just never seen anything quite like this. But I know also Lucas, his first film had been a science fiction film called THX 1138, which was critically admired, but it failed at the box office. And I
Wasn't it
think
just
he
a
just,
short film? Because I remember seeing
no,
that a long time ago.
no, he did a short film first, actually. And then he formed Zoetrope Studios with Francis Ford Coppola after film school. And it was Francis Ford Coppola who said, "Hey, I think your short film would actually make a good feature." So they expanded it and they made THX 1138, but it failed at the box office. It was not a hit. And Lucas, I think he felt it was because it was too dark. The tone was too dark. And so he felt when he did Star Wars, he wanted it to be much more fun and adventurous. And he wanted it to be a throwback to those old movies that used to be fun. Whereas in the 70s, we got a lot of very dark movies coming out, you know? And I think that's part of what made it so different. It didn't really fit in with the current zeitgeist, if you will. It was not a dark movie. It was not a cynical movie. It was just fun. It was a good time, you know. And I think people really responded to that. I know I did. I loved it, and for me, it did become a bit of an obsession. I spent a year of my life doing nothing but drawing Star Wars pictures and inventing my own Star Wars comics and stuff like that. I was obsessed with Star Wars, but it hasn't really continued on for me the way it has for some people who are still obsessed all these years later.
Yeah, so this came out in the mid to late 70s, and I think you're right. The timing was a big thing about it because as you move from decade to decade, generation to generation, there's a cultural shift. And in the 70s, there was a lot of reflection going on, anti-war, thinking about life. It's kind of like after, in the 40s after World War II when you had film noir and things like that. And I think people were looking for deeper movies. And you had a lot of these longer movies, these auteur movies, these filmmaker-driven movies. You had movies that were free of the Hays Code and the censorship, able to show more sex and violence on screen. So you had a lot of darker tones, darker elements, deeper elements, philosophical movies, dark endings. The bad guy wins, and politics, philosophy. And you're right. I think this being something that didn't have any of that, it was just a fun little popcorn movie. So I think the timing of this worked out well because as you usher into the 80s, you get a cultural shift. You don't get like the Doors and, well, Doors, I guess was more the 60s, but you don't get like the Rolling Stones and these bands that have like 8-minute songs. You get
Mm-hmm.
like the Blitzkrieg Bop, like the 2-minute pop songs, and you get like the popcorn movies and the Back to the Future and Ghostbusters and just like fun popcorn movies. And it also ushered in the era of the blockbusters now. Blockbusters were a thing where it's like, okay, what's the big summer blockbuster movie that we're going to see 5 times in a theater? So you kind of like the timing of that culturally and I think helped. And I think also technology wise with VHS and home videos and things like that to help propel this. So I think the quality of the movie helped, but also the timing of it helped as well. Because would you say that this is any better if you take the timing out as a franchise than Harry Potter? or than Lord of the Rings. It might be, it might not be. I'm just not into sci-fi, so I'm asking, do you think it's a timing thing or this is better than those type of franchises?
Well, that's a good question. I think for my personal taste, I probably do like this better. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of the Harry Potter films. I did see The Lord of the Rings. I thought it was very good for the most part. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I guess this one, it's hard to separate the nostalgia, thinking back on it and all the feelings I had watching it as a kid. It's hard to separate that now. But watching it again for the first time in many, many years, it struck me that it is a very good movie. It tells a story very clearly. It has characters you like. It sort of does everything right in a way that a lot of modern movies don't. They seem to get these things wrong, even though they have perfect templates that they could copy. They still seem to get it wrong. They have characters that you don't like. They have complicated stories you can't follow. This is really pretty simple, and it just kind of works. Um, I'm not sure what it is about it exactly, but um, yeah, I think the timing played a big part in it being successful. But I think it stands up as I think a very good movie.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you think of the newer incarnations? So I believe there was the second trilogy or the prequel trilogy that Lucas did, and then a more recent trilogy. Um, I don't know if it's necessarily
Yes,
it's a trilogy because I think different directors had their hands in it, so it didn't really play out like a smooth story. But I believe there were
yeah.
like three or four or more Star Wars that came out recently as well. So what do you think about the other incarnations in the franchise?
Well, the prequel trilogy I thought was not as good. I think everybody more or less agreed on that. It didn't quite capture the magic, but as far as the newer ones, I only saw the first one. What is it called? The Force Awakens or something? The very first one they did. And to me, it was basically a beat by beat remake of this movie. They were
You know
just
what's
kind of,
funny about The Force Awakens is you'll have fans that defend it and say, no, it was its own movie. It wasn't a remake. And then you'll have the studio come out and say, yeah, we just wanted to do a remake. We didn't want to take any chances, so we just remade the first one. It's
yeah,
like it's kind of
yeah,
funny where it's like the people who made it admit it's a remake. And even
yeah,
if you heard no side of point of view and you just watch the two movies, it's so obviously a beat for beat remake, but you'll
yeah,
have the fans that come out, they're so passionate that they pretend that they're not seeing what's in front of their eyes. And it was an odd choice where you
yeah,
have all of this time that passed and all of these people that were influenced by it, and this is your best shot is a remake. It's like you have all these
yeah,
decades to like, now it's your time to tell your story. You paid George Lucas $1 billion for this franchise. Yes, now we can do something great. And you know what? We're just gonna make a beat for beat remake. It's like, what?
yeah.
It's
Well, I
like
think
I'm not
this,
a fan of the franchise, but for me, I was shocked that that's the direction you're gonna go in when you could
yeah,
do basically anything you wanted to do.
yeah, exactly. And that was the first time I heard anybody use the term fan service, and I didn't know what they meant, but it was explained to me that basically fan service is trying to please the fans by doing everything that they expect to see. In other words, you got to include all the characters and all the moments and everything that they liked about the first movie. You've got to sort of try and redo it in the second movie. It's some kind of misguided attempt to keep the fans happy. But speaking as a fan, somebody who was obsessed with the first movie, I didn't want to see a beat for beat remake. And I found it difficult to sit through because I kept going, well, gee, I think this is what's going to happen next. I think this must be what's about to happen. Like it just had no surprises for me. I didn't get it at all. So I never did watch any of the other ones. I don't know if they were remakes or if they were their own thing, but I haven't seen them yet.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's interesting to see where they'll go because I know they refocused on the TV shows and Disney is
Yeah,
just having a complete overhaul in general because they tried to bring politics and things into it. Whereas with Lucas, I think he tried to take some of the politics out of it in a way. Um,
yeah.
so I'm not sure.
I've I've heard that the TV show is good, The Mandalorian. I've heard good things about it, but I've never seen it. But yeah, Lucas, he was not convinced this was going to be a hit. And actually, not many people were convinced it was going to be a hit. It's really quite remarkable. Apparently, a lot of the cast and crew who worked on it didn't really think it was going to work. Nobody really had faith in it. Um,
And the
when he screened it,
performances are kind of inconsistent as well, because
yeah,
Carrie Fisher has like a British accent at one point in the film, and
oh
then at a
yeah,
certain point in the film, she just completely drops the British accent. It's like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Like, is there anyone doing quality control in this movie? It reminded me as well as like I know I'll see movies like that. I mean, like, so what's happening on set that no one notices that at one point she has a British accent, another point she's just talking like regular Carrie Fisher. I remember Suicide Squad. I never got why people loved Margot Robbie so much in that role because I didn't think she was very good, but she kept playing Harley Quinn, and she almost had three different chances because every time she played Harley Quinn, it was almost like they rebooted what Harley Quinn was. But sometimes she'd be talking like, "Hey, what's in the?" She'd have like the Harley Quinn accent, and then sometimes she'll just talk like Margot Robbie. And it's like from scene to scene. It's like sometimes she has this Harley Quinn affect, and other times she just talks like Margot Robbie. And it's like you see movies like that, and you wonder like what's going on set that like no one's noticing this at all, or even in the editing room or somewhere. It's like anyone gonna notice like accents
yeah.
keep coming in and out of the movie?
Well, apparently George Lucas didn't talk to the actors very much when he made this movie. He kind of ignored them for the most part. I think he was so busy dealing with the huge machine, and I think he found it a very difficult production. Like he was used to really low budget productions with small crews, and this was like huge, and so it kind of turned into a very stressful, different thing for him. And I think he was spending more time talking to the crew and worried about all the various parts of the machine that have to be moving at the same time, and so the actors were kind of left to their own devices for the most part. And the most direction that they got was do it again, but a little bit faster. That was sort of one of his big directions. So it wouldn't be surprising if he didn't notice inconsistencies that were happening. And I mean, I can understand it, when you're dealing with so much stuff at once, it's easy to kind of let things go like that.
Yeah, I think there's a
But
lot of stories of the actors saying how they tried to talk him out of a lot of things. And, a lot of the dialogue, they were like, who talks like this? And, can we change this? Can we tweak that? So, a lot of that all tracks. And especially then when you look at I think he allowed behind the scenes footage of the prequel trilogy to be shown. And you can see in the behind the scenes footage of that, like how awkward he is as a director and um so yeah, I mean, definitely people have their strengths and weaknesses, and everyone's not an A+ in every category of what they're doing. Obviously he knows what he's doing to an extent. He's a billionaire,
yeah,
and he's made a lot of great films, not just this trilogy, but
yeah,
he does have his glaring weaknesses.
yeah. Well, I mean, the proof is in the pudding in the sense that this movie was a huge hit and people loved it. So he must have done something right, you know. But but yeah, he's not a real actor's director. I don't think he's more about the big picture. Um, but that's okay. I
Yeah.
actually love his second movie, American Graffiti, which is much more of a character piece in a way. So maybe he talked to the actors a bit more during that production. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely an ensemble piece just like this as well, but I guess it's more grounded and a smaller cast, just following a group of, I guess, graduating high schoolers um,
Yeah,
on the night of the prom or something like that. So, yeah,
yeah. Just a small little film, but it really worked.
yeah, yeah. So the casting of this was kind of interesting because in this time period, you had a lot of the anti-hero types. So
Yes,
Harrison Ford, he he's looked at now as a unique character, but a lot of people played that type of character. You know, Steve
yes,
McQueen and a lot of other actors, had that prototype of this like
yeah,
cynical, like, yeah, I don't take anything serious. I'm just the wise quipping, tough guy, loner, blah blah blah. But yeah, I think Harrison Ford did a great job here. But I can easily see Steve McQueen or a lot of those actors from the late '70s being able to pull this off. It would be awkward them in the role thinking about it now, but I think at the time there were a lot of prototypes for the
yeah,
Harrison Ford character as far as that goes.
yeah. And of course, famously, he was not even trying to be in the movie. He had been in American Graffiti, of course. He'd worked with Lucas, but he'd kind of become a carpenter. He wasn't really satisfied with his acting choices and his career, so he became a carpenter. But George Lucas asked him if he would mind reading during the auditions with some of the other actors, and so he was just reading. He didn't really have any intention of becoming, an actor in this movie, but he was apparently the best, and Lucas convinced him to take the part. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And he was one that was very cynical. He's cynical today. But even the stories you hear about him at the time, um, I think there was a scene that messed up, and he was like, "Hey, kid, if they're noticing that, then we got real problems," where, when there was
Yeah,
like lack of continuity and things like I mentioned with the accents and things like that. And, he was more big picture, kind of like Lucas. It was like, listen, if they're noticing these
yes,
little things and we got bigger issues than the little things. But
yeah,
yeah, he had kind of a cynical attitude. I think he was busy like just banging Carrie Fisher and just happy that he had a paycheck, because I think she famously wrote a book and mentioned the affair that he wasn't too happy that she brought out, I think a few
uh-huh,
years before she died in her book.
yeah,
But yeah, there was a lot of that. I mean, it's the '70s. I mean, people were more loose with things like that. I think even Carrie, I didn't read the book, but I've seen in interviews where she talked about the fact that she was just like screwing everyone on set, doing a bunch of drugs and just having a good time.
yes. Well, Carrie Fisher, she hadn't done very much before she played Princess Leia in this movie. She had done
She's the
some stuff
daughter of
as,
someone famous, right?
yeah, Debbie Reynolds,
Yeah,
um,
Debbie Reynolds. And her
and I
father's
think,
famous? Uh,
yeah, it's Eddie Fisher,
oh yeah, okay.
Eddie Fisher, um, and I think she did stuff as a child, mainly through her mother, appearing in some of her mother's stuff, but she really hadn't done much at all before
Debbie
getting this
Reynolds was
part.
in Singing in the Rain, right?
Yes, she was. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think Carrie Fisher, she made her debut at the age of 17 um, in a different movie, but but it was Star Wars that really kind of was her big break.
Yeah, she was in Shampoo, I think.
Yes, that's right,
Yeah,
Shampoo.
she was in a few decent movies. But much like Mark Hamill, I think this is the thing she's known for. I think Harrison Ford is the one actor that really propelled this into stardom into a lot of other different franchises like Indiana Jones and stuff like that.
Yes. Well, I know she kind of blamed a couple of failures that she was in after Star Wars for kind of derailing her career. Um, Actually, one of them was the Blues Brothers, which I find amazing because I always think of that as a successful film. But apparently, it didn't make money at the time, and she kind of blames that for derailing her career. So she just kind of went back to playing Princess Leia in the sequels, and that was really kind of really her big thing. Yeah, she didn't really go on to much else.
Mhm. So any blame goes on all the drugs and sex and other things she was focused on instead of her career. You
Oh,
know,
well, it could be. Yeah,
take
that's
some accountability. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
so you
but
have her, and then you have, of course, in the trio, the triplets, you have Mark Hamill as well.
yes,
So I'm not great at noticing these things, but evidently his face got completely ruined by a car accident, and his looks kind of faded with that, and
yeah,
that kind of killed any kind of leading man roles he would get. And they actually had to incorporate that into the story to start. I think the second movie is where that happened,
oh
and
yes,
to cover up the fact that he looks different now. I'm not even great with that stuff, man. I barely even noticed it. But
yeah,
obviously it's visible to a lot more people, those facial aspects. Maybe it's because I just don't care about stuff like that much. But
yeah,
evidently that had some to do with derailing his career. But I think he's more known for, aside from this series, is voicing the animated version of the Joker in the
yes,
Batman the animated series, because he's taken that on for a while into the animated movies, the video games and things like that. So for
yeah,
people who like cult movies or like comic book movies or sci-fi, I think that's all a similar audience. So he's been able to sustain a career by appealing to basically the same type of audience with the voice acting for the Joker, the
yeah.
Star Wars things, and doing like cult and B type movies and things like that.
Yeah, so Mark Hamill, after the success of Star Wars, he sort of found like he was kind of typecast in a way, or people really saw him as Luke Skywalker. And he also became a teen idol, and he was in magazines like Tiger Beat and that kind of stuff. And he didn't like that, you know, he didn't want to be a teen idol. He wanted to be a serious actor. So he
Is that
did
why he
take
got
some,
into that accident? He scarred up his face so he couldn't be a teen idol anymore. That's
yeah, that's
that's
right.
that's that's levels to this game,
That,
man.
that's dedication.
That is
Um,
dedication. He's a
yeah,
method actor. That's what it is. You see,
that's right.
we thought that, that we didn't know who they were making fun of in Tropic Thunder when we did that movie with method actors going too far when RDJ was in blackface. And we're like, what kind of method actors are they making fun of that go too far? It's Mark Hamill. He's the
That's
method
right.
actor that went too far.
That's right. Um, so yeah, he did. He took some questionable roles, you know, movies like The Big Red One, but he did a lot of theater. He went to Broadway and he acted in plays like The Elephant Man and Amadeus. And oddly enough, when they made Amadeus into a movie, Mark Hamill actually auditioned to be in the movie, and one of the studio executives said, "I don't want Luke Skywalker in my film." So he was still seen as Luke Skywalker, and he couldn't really get away from that. But yeah, he did a lot of theater, I think, as a way to sort of be
I didn't
serious
know
about
that
acting.
Amadeus thing because Amadeus was a huge movie in the 80s.
Yeah,
That was a
it
pretty big
was.
movie. I remember we saw it in school assembly one time, I guess because of
Yeah,
the whole music tie-in, but that was a great movie. That could have did a
yeah,
lot for his career to have that on his filmography. And I
it could
could
have.
see him pulling that role off, especially when
Yeah,
you think about the Joker character that he does with the voiceover. That plays
yeah,
in perfectly with how Amadeus was portrayed in the movie. So that could have
yeah.
been big for him. That could have been big.
Oh yeah, yeah. And he did eventually start to take more movie roles, and he did play some interesting characters later on in life. But I think he just couldn't be the teen idol. He just didn't want to do that. He didn't want to be the teen heartthrob. And yeah, who knows? Maybe that accident was one of his ways to avoid it. I don't know. But like you, I didn't notice. I never noticed that his face changed. I didn't see him as looking different. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
like I said, I mean, it was a huge pivot in his career because of the facial feature change. And like I said, they wrote it into the movie. So obviously a lot
Yeah,
of people noticed, but
yeah,
I guess we're in a different boat, you know?
I
So
guess. Yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah,
And then those are the main three cast members. And of course you have here Alec Guinness. Um
yes.
and speaking of method actors, if we're gonna keep that theme going, didn't he play Gandhi in a movie?
Um,
I believe he
Alec
did.
Guinness?
Yeah, he played Gandhi, I believe, in a movie.
I'm not
Unless I'm
sure.
thinking of the wrong one. You can look that up real quick, but I'll keep going with that, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But I believe he played Gandhi and wore a brown face for the movie.
Okay.
I think he may even won an Oscar or something. I know it was a highly praised role that obviously wouldn't pass in today's culture. Um, but I think it may have even been for a David Lean film. I could be
Um,
completely off, but
yeah, it says here that David Lean and Sam Spiegel planned to make a film about Gandhi after
mhm,
The Bridge on the River Kwai,
mhm.
and Alec Guinness was going to play Gandhi, but ultimately that project was abandoned. So I don't think he
I know a
actually did.
white actor played Gandhi. If it wasn't Alec Guinness, who was it
Yes,
then?
I think it was Ben Kingsley.
Ben Kingsley. Okay, got it. I
Yes.
know I saw Gandhi. I remember. See, like my memory isn't great. I get the basic things, but that's why you got to Google. It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
you can't just go by memory. So, but I do remember David Lean and Gandhi and Alec Guinness, and I remember a white
Yeah.
person playing Gandhi, but the facts are a little mixed up. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was actually a good memory because I did not remember that they were talking about doing a version of Gandhi with Alec Guinness. So you remembered a very interesting
You
thing
see,
there.
if Google ruined my talents, see, without Google, that would be really impressive, right? The fact that I could just come off of that on memory, that's so impressive. But the fact
Yeah.
that you can Google it in 2 seconds, it just makes me look like an idiot because I'm wrong, So,
Well, I don't know. I think no, I'm still impressed that I'd never heard of that, so
yeah.
that was an impressive piece of trivia.
So,
But yes, but
what was since you're already looking at his filmography, what was some of the major thing that Guinness did?
Alec Guinness, um, just
Because
hang
he
on a
was
sec.
one of the more prestige actors in this. I think he was offered points or like back end, but he turned it down because he wanted just money up
Yes,
front. So he could have been one of the actors that benefited the most from this role. Um,
yes. Well, he obviously was in a lot of British films, The Lavender Hill Mob, The Man in the White Suit, um, you
Something we
know,
would know today. Anything?
The Lady Killers, which the Coen brothers remade much
Yeah,
later, the
yeah.
original version of The Lady Killers, and of course, Bridge on the River Kwai. Um,
So that would be it. Bridge over the River Kwai and Star Wars are his major roles.
well, Lawrence of Arabia,
Oh, he was in that too. Okay, so
Dr.
David Lean
Zhivago.
films. Oh, so he was in all the major David Lean films then.
Yeah,
Those are the three major
yes,
ones.
yeah. So
Shivago,
he's in
River Kwai, and
tons of stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, he was the one with the real prestige. I wouldn't even necessarily call it star power, but he
Yeah,
added a level of respectability to this silly little, sci-fi film. Or, obviously this isn't really sci-fi. It's more like fantasy because the rules of science go out the window with
yes,
this movie. So,
yes, that's true. It's not meant to be that kind of hard science fiction where we're trying to understand how the technology works. It's not that.
no,
It's
no.
more just a fun story.
But yeah, aside from that, I guess you also have here what's his name? That played Van Helsing, another famous British actor here. Why is his name not coming to me?
Um, uh, Cushing,
Yeah,
yeah, Peter Cushing,
Peter Cushing. Yeah.
yes,
Obviously, a lot of horror movie fans will know him from the Hammer films for playing Van Helsing in a lot of those Dracula movies and also just in general in a lot of those Hammer films. That's where I know him from, and obviously in this as well, he plays a good
yes,
villain. Um,
yeah.
and
He definitely is a recognizable character actor. Um, Apparently, they also at one time were talking about Christopher Lee being in it, but he turned it down. But he
what
would have
role
been
was he going to be
another.
up for?
Good question.
I would
Um,
think the same role, maybe.
well, it's possible.
You can't get
Yeah, it
Christopher Lee,
was.
get
It
Peter Cushing.
was. Yeah, it was the same role, Grand Moff Tarkin, but Christopher Lee declined. But
They were
Yeah, a
actually
lot of
really good
these.
friends behind the scenes. Obviously, they were in a lot of movies together. Van Helsing,
Yes,
Dracula, Hammer movies. One to be the good guy, one to be the bad guy. Generally,
yes,
Peter Cushing being the protagonist, and um, but yeah, I mean, aside from that, I guess the only other notable name in this would be voice acting um,
James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And of course, that's one of the controversies, perhaps, of the movie, is that David Prowse, who plays Darth Vader, he was originally going to voice that character, but they decided that they didn't like the sound of his voice, and other cast members were calling him Darth Farmer because of his accent, his West County British accent, apparently. So they decided that they couldn't go with his voice. And apparently, Lucas considered Orson Welles as a possibility to do the voice, but he felt that too many people might recognize Orson Welles, so they went with James Earl
Isn't
Jones.
that why you get Orson Welles? Because people recognize him?
Well, I guess
That's the
that
whole
would be
point
if
of
you
Orson
wanted that,
Welles.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
guess he wanted it to be not recognizable so much.
But I'm just saying, like, why even consider him if the biggest flaw you have is his biggest strength? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, hey, like, I
No,
don't want
it's
that actress because she's too pretty. Well, she's known for being pretty. Why even consider her then? It's like the whole point of Orson Welles, if he's only going to be a voice actor, is his voice. It's so distinguished and it's so unique and it's so recognizable. So it's kind
yeah.
of an odd to say I want him, but I don't want him for the exact same reason. So
That's true. That's a good point. Um, and Prowse, unlike a lot of the other British actors like Anthony Daniels, who plays C3PO, most of them hadn't really done anything before. This was kind of like their big break. But David Prowse actually had done quite a bit of stuff before. And he was a big weightlifter, big guy. And he'd appeared in all kinds of films, including A Clockwork Orange. Um,
well, he was the weightlifter in A Clockwork Orange?
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Because I remember
And,
hearing a behind the scenes story about that.
oh,
And
yes?
yeah, Orson Welles would make people do hundreds of takes. Famously, Catman Struthers had the mental breakdown and died shortly after making The Shining. But so people were like, so I think he was saying something like, hey, like let's just get this done quick. I want to get in and out of here. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, of course, because he was, for his small part in A Clockwork Orange. And evidently everyone started, laughing to themselves because they're like, dude, you don't know what's going on in this set, bro. Like you're just coming in today. We've been here for months. Prepare to do 100 takes. But evidently, I don't know if it's his muscles or something, but he only ended up doing a few takes, and it ended up surprising the cast that Kubrick didn't make him do hundreds of
Oh,
takes.
yes.
But evidently, he came on
Well,
set
that's
and he was
good.
like, "All right, let's get this done," type attitude. And that's the only reason I remember him is because of that. So when you bring him up, I'm like, wait a minute, that guy did something else. So he's Darth Vader, that bodybuilder.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
weird.
Well,
I never knew that.
he played a lot of monsters and strongmen, I think, prior to Star Wars. He's in Vampire Circus as a strongman. Um,
Because
yeah.
there's
So
only it. I mean, Clockwork Orange was early '70s to late '70s, so he was still pretty young when he did this, I guess.
yeah,
Okay.
he played the monster in Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, for instance.
Mhm.
Um, he was in Jabberwocky as well. Um, but so he was a guy with some credits and some experience. He claimed that he was originally offered the role of Jaws in the James Bond films, which ultimately went to Richard Kiel. And also, he claims he was offered Conan the Barbarian before Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Mhm.
Don't know if that's true, but that's something he claimed. Um, but I think he he wasn't too happy with the fact that his voice was replaced, and that wasn't the only thing. He was originally told that they would see his face at the end of Return of the Jedi when Vader's mask comes off, but instead they used a different actor for that. So I'm not sure why.
Oh, so that
Um,
makes sense then, because I'm like, what are you talking about? He's so young, but when we see his face, he looks old. That's what threw me off. I'm like, wait a minute, that guy was young in A Clockwork Orange. Why does he look so old when we see his face? So there
yeah,
are three actors that play Darth Vader then.
I guess so. Yeah. And
Okay.
apparently, all throughout that movie, he felt he was being sidelined and he wasn't being treated well. And ultimately, I think George Lucas barred him from appearing as Darth Vader or attending official conventions. And he didn't really give a reason for it, other than saying that he had burnt too many bridges between
Mhm.
Lucasfilm and himself. So there was some kind of tension there between them,
It's
which
so
I'm
weird.
sure,
Like anyone can play Darth. If he's not the face at the end, and if
yeah,
he's not the voice, he's just a guy in a black suit. Anyone could play that part, honestly.
yeah, yeah, but
It's not even like he was the guy who played Darth Maul. Is it Darth Maul, the guy with the two swords?
yes, yes,
It's not like he was Darth Maul, where that guy was like a legitimate martial artist and he did like, really complex fight scenes. Eh, he didn't
no,
do anything in this movie. He was just standing around being tall. You didn't
yeah,
even see his muscles in the black suit. So
that's true. But
talk
apparently,
about
when he did,
overplaying your hand.
yeah, but when he died, Lucas did say that, David brought a physicality to Darth Vader that was essential for the character. He made Vader leap off the page and onto the big screen with an imposing stature and movement performance to match the intensity and undercurrent of Vader's presence. So, he did sort of
I don't believe that. That
no.
sounds like something he probably got off of Chat GPT or something his publicist wrote. That doesn't sound like a real person saying that. It sounds like a made up statement. It sounds
Well,
generic and made up, and it doesn't feel genuine in any way.
I thought you were going to say it just sounds like something you say when a person dies. You say nice things about them when they die. But
That sounds incredibly generic.
yeah. So yeah, apparently, not a real happy story for David Prowse in terms of his involvement with the Star Wars films.
Yeah.
But talking earlier about how nobody believed in it, Lucas's wife was apparently a film editor, and she apparently burst into tears when she saw Star Wars, and she felt that it was going to really pale in comparison to another film that she'd been working on, which was Martin Scorsese's New York, New York,
Mhm.
which turned out to be a big flop. But she
Not
she
to get
thought it.
sidetracked on Martin Scorsese, but for a great filmmaker, he has so many flops.
Yeah,
So many flops that people just completely ignore.
yeah,
And he keeps getting chance after chance after chance, but I mean, he's got some bombs on his resume, and that is one that people pretend never happened. I think the
yeah.
song came from that movie, though, right?
I think so.
It's either the
Maybe.
song came from that movie or Eliza Minnelli's, or because there were two
Yeah.
versions of that song, the Liza Minnelli and the Frank Sinatra, right? So
Yes.
I don't know if either the original song came from that movie or the remake came from that movie. But I think
Yeah.
Liza did the original and Frank did the remake.
Yeah.
But if Liza did the original, wasn't Liza in New York, New York?
She
So
was.
then
Yeah.
so then the song came from that movie.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
would be the only good thing that came from that movie.
Maybe. But I found that interesting that his wife was convinced Star Wars was going to fail and New York, New York was going to be a big hit, but it was the opposite. So
Yeah.
even
Well,
his
yeah,
own wife didn't.
you got a prestige director in Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
You just assume.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, here we have Han Solo. So what do you think about the two very different archetypal heroes here with Han Solo and Luke Skywalker? In that generally a movie would have one of these type of heroes, and in this movie you have two of these type of heroes to contrast each other.
Yeah. Well, I think Luke Skywalker is kind of like the everyman in a way. He's like the nice guy. In a way, he's kind of like representing the audience. He's the guy who doesn't know anything and he's learning things, and he just seems like a really nice person. Whereas Han Solo seems a little more edgy. And of course, this scene here that we're watching with Greedo is one of the controversial moments, I guess, where Han Solo is believed to have fired his gun first in the original cut of the movie, and then George Lucas changed that in subsequent cuts. Um, but that's an example of
Well, this is the subsequent cut we're watching.
yes. And George Lucas claims that it's not true that he fired first Han Solo, that it was always meant to be more at the same time or as a reaction, sort of like the old gunfighters in westerns. You always had to, the bad guy had to pull first, and then the good guy could shoot. But he claims it was the choice of shot that was used. That the frame, you couldn't tell that Greedo had pulled his gun, but that just seems hard to believe because that would be a very bad choice then for your storytelling to choose a frame that didn't actually show what happened. That doesn't really make sense to me. But I guess the point, though, is Han Solo seems like he's that edgier, darker character who's willing to do whatever it takes. He's selfish. Um, he's not a hero. He doesn't want to be a hero. He's in it for himself. So I think they're kind of opposites in that way, and they do kind of complement each other nicely. What
That
did you
wasn't my
think?
question, though. My question is,
What's your question?
I'm aware that they're different. I'm
Yes.
saying, what do you think of having two different archetypal heroes in the same movie? Generally, you'd go with one or the other, you know? The fact that this movie has both, like, it's kind of odd, no?
Well, I don't know. I think that, as I was saying, I think they complement each other because you've got the
Mhm.
one guy who wants to do good. He wants to join, become a Jedi like his
Are you
father
going to
and all that stuff.
describe are you going to describe them again?
Well, how else can I do it? How else can I compare these guys?
Yeah.
Um,
No,
this
I
is
think it's kind
another.
of interesting in the sense that you like you said, you can't pick which one you want to follow, but generally it's you just stick with one character and develop them a little bit more. But I guess
Yeah,
since this has three movies, you have time to develop. But I've always felt that these characters were underdeveloped, which kind of
yeah,
helps the movie in a sense that, oh, like, oh, look at me, I'm Luke Skywalker. Oh, I'm this, I'm that, and the more defined a character is, the less you can say that. The
yeah,
less you actually know a character, the more you can then project on them. And I think that's why Star Wars has so much lore, is because there's a lot of general stuff out there, and then people just fill in the blanks. That's why there's so much fan fiction, and people love these characters so much, because there's nothing to not like about them because you don't know that much detail. The more detail you know about someone, the more reasons you have to not like them. So,
Well, that's an interesting point. I did notice watching it for the first time in a long time that it doesn't have a clear main character. There's a lot of characters. It's more of an ensemble, as you said, like American Graffiti in a way, his previous film. It's kind of an ensemble, and we start off following the two droids, right? C3PO and R2D2. We're kind of following them, so it's kind of like they're our main characters. But then we meet Luke, and he kind of becomes our main character, and then we meet Han Solo. I do wonder if Han Solo was a bit of an accident in the sense that everybody liked him, and so maybe that's why he became more of a character in a way. In a way, he's kind of like the Fonz on Happy Days or something. Like he was never meant to be the main character, but people liked him so much that he kind of became the main character in a way. I wonder if that's an aspect of it.
I don't
What do
think
you think
so.
about?
I think it's an
No?
ensemble film.
Yeah,
I think they were all meant to have decent sized roles. Um, yeah, I think they were all meant to be spotlighted because I
yeah,
mean, Han Solo has. I don't think his part got any bigger or smaller in the other movies. I mean, based on your argument or your stance, his role should have gotten bigger. But if anything, it got smaller because he was in cryogenic stasis or whatever he was in
Yeah.
the other movie. So he was kind of taken out of commission, for a while in some
Yeah, well,
movies.
it'll be interesting to watch the other ones again because it's been so long.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like he may have, in a way, surprised Lucas by being as popular as he was.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, so I don't know, but I guess I kind of view it a little bit differently. But but yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I think part of the reason for the success of the film is that you have a lot of archetype characters and you have an archetype story. In that you could take this story and you can use it for a lot of different movies, not necessarily the space aspect, but the hero's journey, which is a big part of this anytime people talk about the hero's journey in that book, they use this film as an example of what the hero's journey is. The reluctant hero going on the mission, the mentor. It's such a prototypical story and prototypical characters. I think the fact that the lack of detail and the generalities, I think, is part of why this film has such longevity and staying power and such a wide audience, because it's just a prototype.
Yeah. So I sort of touched on it briefly, and we saw another scene there while we were talking of things that George Lucas changed when he sort of remastered the films and re-released them. And I know there's been a lot of different opinions on that, but he added in that scene with Jabba the Hutt, which was originally just a regular human being in the original footage, but then he inserted a CGI version of the Jabba the Hutt that we know from later in the series. Um, so, what did you think about those additions? Do you think they were a good choice, or should he have just left it the way it was?
I don't know if I've made this clear or not, but I don't really give a shit. I'm not a Star Wars person, man. I understand where you're coming from. It's so many people were like up in arms, like, how dare he? This he shouldn't. We should take the rights from Star Wars away from him. The minute he made this film, it became our film. It's no longer his. And there was all these arguments of like who deserves ownership for something that's art once it's released. Should the creator be able to continually edit his art, or is the art now to the public, and should he not have the right to change these movies? And I remember it was such a huge debate when these movies were re-released in theaters with these changes prior to the prequels. And my stance back then and my stance now is get over it. Like, come on. Like, you've had this version of the movie for decades, and this version of the movie is still out there. And it's not like it's a studio interfering and changing it. It's the man that made the goddamn movie. Like, he has the right to make whatever changes he want because you still have the original, you know?
Yeah,
And with all their complaining about how much he's changing the originals, look at what's happening to the franchise now. It hasn't gotten any better.
yeah.
So,
Well, that's a good
but
point
maybe
that
you
it is
care a little bit more because you're more invested. What were your thoughts on the
yeah,
changes?
yeah. Well, I guess I tend to be of the opinion that just leave it alone. It was what it was, and people loved it. And a lot of filmmakers will talk about that. They'll say, "Oh, I can see all the flaws in it. It wasn't my best work or whatever," but people love it, and so you just kind of accept that it is what it is, and you leave it as is. I mean, I think it's okay to clean it up and make it look better. Like I know most of the changes he made were special effects or making it look a little bit better, and that's okay. But I mean, changing some of the story elements, I don't know. That seems a little weird. Um, I
You
think
always have
it
that
is. It
as an
is.
artist, and I'm sure you as a writer would know this as well, in that you can always continue like making and remaking and editing and tweaking the same project. You could spend a
Yes.
lifetime trying to perfect the one project. And sometimes it's best to just set a deadline and say, hey, this is when I'm going to let go of the creative process of this project. And
Yeah.
this is going to be whatever it's going to be at this point. or I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to tweak this thing. And you have a
Yeah.
lot of people that fall into that trap. You'll have a writer that keeps tweaking the exact same script for decades, thinking this is the one, this is going to be the one, and I can't let a lesser version of this script get out there,
Yeah.
and you keep tweaking and tweaking the song or the script or the movie or whatever it is, the painting,
Yeah.
rather than just setting a hard deadline and saying, no, this is the final version of this, and then I'm going to move on. And he's lucky in the sense it's a lot of people that fixate on that. It's usually an incomplete project or maybe not such a great project. So he got kind of lucky in that the projects he fixated on, these three films, are so great that they sustained his career and him financially basically for the rest of his life. So the fact
Yeah.
that he fixated on this didn't really hurt him, but in a way you could say it did, because if he would have just let these go from, when did the last one come out, like 81, to the prequels were in the 2000s, like 20 years later or something. Like,
Yeah.
I'm guessing
Yeah.
the dates. I'm not sure. I'm
I
guessing
think it
the
was
dates, but
84 was the last
let's
Return
say
of the
roughly
Jedi.
around 20 years, maybe
Yeah.
you would say that
Yeah.
he could have let these films go and been working on a trilogy that would have been more fleshed out than the trilogy we got. If he would have maybe invested more time into the prequels, then maybe they would have been better, instead of like trying to remake these movies and spending decades doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would tend to agree. I mean, I've been on the other side of it in terms of, working on a play for a number of years for a producer, and they keep saying, "Oh no, change this, change that," and by the end of it, you've written basically three different plays, and any one of them could have been fine. They could have produced any one of them, but instead, you've now just got one instead of three because they're all kind of the same play, and you've just wasted all these years working on it. But you could have had three separate plays in that same time period if you had just finished them and said, "This is it." And I think it was Chekhov who said, "You don't finish a play, you abandon it." And that's basically true. Like, you never get to the point where it's 100% perfect. You're never going to be 100% satisfied. So you just have to say, "Okay, that's as close as I can get it. I'm done." And then you move on.
And even
That's
someone like Lucas here, where it's like, dude, it's not perfect, but look how much goddamn money you made. It's like, this is not
Yeah,
a failure. You can let this go. Like, people love
exactly.
this shit,
Yeah, yeah, totally. And of course, Spielberg's done the same thing, with E.T. He made changes to that movie. So people
But I
do
don't
it.
know if he was obsessed with ET like Lucas is with Star Wars. You know,
Yeah,
I don't know if, like, he's been spending decades refining it. Like Lucas
I
is
don't
did with
know.
Star
Yeah,
Wars. I mean, when you look at their filmographies, I think that the proof is in the pudding there. When Spielberg has a larger output, since
yes,
the late '70s, early '80s than Lucas has had. So,
yeah,
but yeah, so one thing about this movie is that it did come out in the late '70s, and you don't really see a lot of that on screen, honestly,
no,
because some movies, they're great, great, great movies. And one of the reasons why I love Stanley Kubrick so much is that his films don't feel dated. You
yeah,
have a lot of great films, you'll watch them and it's like, man, Terminator's a great movie, but man, this feels so '80s.
yeah,
Or like even like One Flew of the Cuckoo's Nest. You'll see some scenes and like, yikes, this is a really dated scene, even though it's a great movie.
yeah,
One thing about this, maybe obviously because it's space, but he didn't get caught up in like '70s lingo or anything about the '70s that would make this film feel like a time capsule.
yeah,
And it's part of, like I was saying before, where it's just kind of like this shell of movie and a shell of characters, this prototype, and that you can't pin it down. You can't find
no,
anything to really dislike about the leads, because they're so like generic. They're so like a framework. And the same thing with the story, and the same thing with the time it's taken place. It's just a generic time and space. It's
Yeah.
there's nothing about it that says, I don't want to watch a 70s movie. There's nothing about this that feels like a 70s movie or with the sequels an 80s movie. It's just there, and I think that extends to why it's still so popular because it's timeless, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
So, anything do you have any of those facts about like what was going on in 77 when this movie came out?
Yes, I
I was
do.
trying to lead you into that, but I guess I
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
flat out
okay.
ask
Well,
you.
I was about to go there. I was
Okay.
feeling it. I was feeling
Okay.
it. I was just pausing for respect, and then I was gonna. But but here we are. So, yes. Well, in 1977, Jimmy Carter started. He was inaugurated as the 39th president of the United States in January, and that was a big change, of course, because he was known as being so honest, and that's why he was elected. He was just so honest after Nixon and all that
Mm.
corruption, I guess. And so, in a way, it's like the dawn of a new era, I guess. Um, the Atari 2600 gaming system was launched, which became a huge phenomenon, but not right away. I mean, I remember it more in the 80s, the Atari becoming super popular, but it apparently launched in 77.
Did it have a
Surprised
Star
me.
Wars game?
They did eventually. I'm not sure when it came out, but they did eventually have a Star Wars game. Um, the first Apple II also came out in 77. So
The Apple
Apple,
II iPhone?
the what?
The Apple II
No,
iPhone?
no, it's the Apple II 8-bit home computer.
Oh,
I had friends who had the Apple
imagine 8
IIc.
bits just for a
Yeah,
computer. Just
yeah.
a whole computer, just 8 bits. It's
Oh,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. It was amazing. I remember my friend joking he had a different computer, but he basically said, "Do you want a calculator?" Because that's about all it was good for. It was like a oversized calculator. But
I remember when I was in junior high school, this had to have been the 90s, sometime in the late 90s. Um, we had a computer class where it's like two-person per computer, and like the most fun thing to do would be playing pool. And playing pool was clicking on the mouse, holding the button down and pulling back on it, and then letting it go and watching the balls
yeah,
hit each other. You just compare that to like some of the video games out now,
yeah,
it's crazy. And you compare
yeah.
that, like I had people in 1977 and be like, wow, a mouse and you can click, cool, wow. You just think about technology in that way.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But it's interesting. It's sort of like Star Wars brought in a whole new kind of level of technology to filmmaking, and you can see these computers and these gaming systems that are launching at the same time. It was like a new era in a way. Um, on a slightly downer side of it, Elvis Presley gave his last concert and
Mm.
actually died.
Is
And
that the one where he said Elvis has left the building or something like that? Or
I'm not sure about that, but it was on June 26th,
there was the
and
one
nobody
where
knew.
he had lost a lot of weight and then he had like the classic black suit and then he
Yeah,
was like, Elvis has left the building or good night or something like that, and he just walked right out after he finished the concert. I don't know if it's
it
that
could
one.
be. It could be.
Mm,
But of course, nobody knew it was going to be his last concert until he died on
mm.
August 16th.
Too many
So
bananas and
peanut butter
what
and
they
banana sandwiches.
yeah, what do they call it? The hunt
Fried
for
peanut.
gold or something? There's something
Yeah.
that sandwich is called, something the hunt for gold or something. But it's
Oh, yeah.
peanut butter, jelly, honey, bacon, bananas,
Yeah.
butter, all fried up. Oh man. It just sounds like a heart attack.
It does. It does. Um, the number one song that came out, or when Star Wars came out, the number one song was Sir Duke by Stevie Wonder, which is not a song that I particularly remember.
And maybe if I heard
Um,
it, I'd know it, but I can't recognize that song by name. Stevie Wonder is a
no.
guy who quietly like won a lot of Grammys and was a huge artist in the 70s.
Yes. Yes. And in England, the number one song was "I Don't Want to Talk About It" slash "First Cut is the Deepest" by Rod Stewart.
Oh,
And
the first
I
cut is
do
the
feel,
deepest. But
yeah, I
that's not his
recognize that one.
original. That was a remake though. Wasn't that
It was,
a
yeah.
Cat Williams? Not Cat Williams.
Cat Williams.
Cat Stevens. Cat
um,
Williams.
I'm
Cat.
not
That was a Cat
100%
Stevens
sure.
song, no?
I'm not 100% sure. It was somebody else's song.
It's
But
been remade a lot.
aside from Sir Duke at number one, number two was "When I Need You" by Leo Sayer, the number two song when Star Wars came out. And that one I do recognize.
When I Need
Um,
You.
"When I Need You."
I don't know if I've
When I
heard of
need
that one.
you, I just close my eyes and I'm with you. It's a slow ballad.
Oh, I think I know
Yeah.
that one. Who sang that? You said?
Leo Sayer,
Ah,
really
those
uncool looking guy.
those lyrics sound familiar, but the name of the artist doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, he was like really big for a brief period of time in the 70s. Um, but most of the songs I don't know. Couldn't Get It Right by the Climax Blues Band is number three. I'm Your Boogeyman by KC and the Sunshine Band.
That is really
Number,
70s.
yeah. And number five is Gotta Give It Up by Marvin Gaye, which surprises me. I know a lot of Marvin Gaye, but I don't really know that one particularly. Um, and then Dreams by Fleetwood Mac is number six. So I do know that one. I know Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. Um, Number seven, Gonna Fly Now by Bill Conti. And
Mm.
number eight,
Yeah,
Hotel
that's from
California by
Rocky.
the Eagles.
We just did a Rocky movie.
Yes, exactly. Hotel California. And Gonna Fly Now, yes. We talked about Hotel California at one point on one of the other discussions.
Yeah, what movie
Um,
was that when we talked about Hotel California? We were like, that character's never leaving. Remember I made
yeah,
that joke. What movie was that
yes.
for?
I'm
I was
not
like, man,
sure.
that's like the Hotel California. He's never leaving, is
Exact,
he?
exactly, yeah. What
God, I
was
remember the
that?
reference, but what the hell was the movie? I'm like, he's never leaving. It's just
Yeah,
like the Hotel California.
yeah. I
I
totally remember
remember,
that
I
moment.
can't remember. Yeah, I remember the movie. I can't remember the goddamn movie we were talking about. That's funny.
Well,
That's
it'll come to us. At number nine was Southern Nights by Glenn Campbell. And number 10, Lucille by Kenny Rogers. And I do recognize that one, Lucille.
mhm.
But yeah, not a lot of really, to
It
me
sounded
anyway,
like a
not a lot.
weak year. Honestly, it doesn't sound like a ton of memorable songs. I am
Yeah,
a big Fleetwood Mac song. I don't remember the song Dreams though, at least by the name.
yeah. If you listen to it, you would recognize it for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
But but yeah, a lot of those ones I don't particularly remember. But
Yeah.
um, at the end of the year, the top song of the year was "Tonight's the Night," "Gonna Be All Right" by Rod Stewart, which I do
Mhm.
know. That one I
Mhm.
know.
It sounds like a big year for Rod Stewart.
Yeah, totally. Um, I Just Want to Be Your Everything by Andy Gibb was number two, and I don't know if I know that one.
Mhm. Andy Gibb, I'm assuming from the Bee Gees.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if he was actually in the Bee Gees. I think he's like the younger brother of the Bee Gees
Mm.
or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because when we did Rocky 3, I recognized all the songs. I knew them all. But I feel like 77, I don't recognize a lot of these. Maybe they haven't lived on as well as some of the others. I'm not sure. But but of course, the music for Star Wars was a huge success.
Oh, so iconic.
Oh
Without the
yeah,
music, this is an average movie, honestly. I'm not even being hyperbolic. Without the music, this movie is not really that elevated. The music is what really pushes the emotions and the when you hear that music you first hear the movie start up, it's just like, wow, we're in for it now, you know?
yeah.
Put generic
Well, yeah,
music in there instead, and it's not that great of an experience anymore.
yeah. Apparently, he hired John Williams on the recommendation of Steven Spielberg, who had worked with him on Jaws. But he initially wasn't going to let him compose everything though. he wanted to use some already pre-existing music, but John Williams convinced him it would be better if he actually wrote all the music, and I think he was right
Oh
because it's
yeah.
certainly. I think it's one of
Well,
the
he
great.
probably thought he was Kubrick, where he's like, yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
gonna use
well,
pre-existing music for my Space Odyssey. You
yeah,
ain't Kubrick,
totally.
buddy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Listen to
but I
the
mean,
musicians when they talk to you.
um, but the soundtrack was just amazing, and it won the Academy Award for Best Original Score. Also
Should
won a
have.
Golden Globe for Best Original Score.
Should
It
have.
won a BAFTA Award for Best Film Music.
Should
It
have.
also won a Grammy Award for Best Score Soundtrack
Should have.
for Visual Media, and also a Grammy Award for Best Instrumental Composition,
Should have. Yeah.
and also a Grammy Award for Best Pop Instrumental Performance.
Pop.
So,
There's pop in
and
this music in this
uh,
movie.
yeah, well, that's what it says anyway.
Mm.
Best Pop Instrumental Performance. Um, and
Was
it
it maybe the
actually,
bar scene?
well, I wonder. I wonder. Yeah,
I'm thinking, where would pop be in this sound in this score?
yeah. And it
Huh.
actually tied for the Saturn Award for Best Music. It tied with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which came out the same year as
Here
well,
we have
which
the
was,
iconic shot of Princess Leia.
yes. When I was a kid, I thought the stormtroopers were robots. I didn't understand that they were just guys in suits.
Well, didn't that change with the prequels? Weren't they supposed to be robots up until the prequels?
Yeah, well, that's the weird thing is that they sort of had robots in the prequels. The explanation I heard is that
No, the
somehow
prequels
that,
said they were all clones of the one guy.
yeah, right, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Mm.
But
Hmm.
I thought they were actual robots.
Because the
And
prequels made it out to be they were all clones of the one guy. And then
yeah,
the latest trilogy showed they were all different people. That's why John Boyega took off his mask and he showed that he was just a regular guy. So they were all just like regular people. I
right.
mean, the only way you can do a PG movie and get away with killing all these people is if they are robots, you know?
Yeah,
So I don't
I
know.
suppose, yeah. But the fact that Luke and Han Solo dress
Imagine
up
if
as
they were
stormtroopers.
robots, just out of theory. Like, imagine how expensive each of them would be, and they're so inefficient.
Oh yeah,
It's like so many of them get killed in like one battle. It's like they're so
yeah,
inefficient, they probably so expensive. It's like, how would you afford all these robots?
yeah.
And like,
Oh,
why
I
would you
know.
keep making them if they suck so much?
Yeah. Well, I think about that in actual warfare, where you've got airplanes that cost millions of dollars and they can be shot down in a second. Like,
Yeah, but how many airplanes are going to be shot down in war? Look how
I don't
many
know.
robots are shot down in like 2 seconds, you
Yeah,
know?
totally, totally. Yeah. But yeah, the fact that they dress up as stormtroopers
See,
should have.
these like well, there's like four rebels here. They're costing billions of dollars in damage with all the robots they're killing.
That's right. Yeah.
If they're not causing billions of dollars in damage, they're like psychopathic killers killing hundreds of people, you know?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Good question.
And for me, like, obviously, when you watch cartoons like in the 80s, like G.I. Joe and different things like that, they couldn't use real guns, so they would all be lasers just like this, because
Yeah.
you can't have them shooting real guns with bullets and stuff like that. Um, and even with this, with all the lasers, it's like, man, can anyone hit a target? It's like, even as a kid, that bothered me. It's like, man, are these guys even dangerous? Like they can't hit anything. There's
Yeah.
no sense that like the heroes were in any danger at all. It's not like when I'm watching this or like when I'm watching G.I. Joe, like whatever Saturday morning cartoon you could fill in that had guns. You never felt
Yeah.
like, man, like they're gonna get hit at one point and possibly get hurt.
Well, they certainly made short work of the rebel soldiers in the opening scene, though. They came in and killed a bunch of people, those stormtroopers. But
Yeah,
just
but that
no.
was kind of like false hope. That's false
Yeah.
advertising, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's like you go home with the girl, and she looks so hot, and then suddenly she started taking off the piles of makeup, and the hair is fake, the nails are fake. You know, she's got the push-up bra, the breasts aren't as big as you thought they were. It's like, man, this
Uh-huh.
is false advertising, you know? It's like that's what this movie started off with. He's like, man, these Star Troopers are dangerous.
Yeah.
Then it's like, wait a minute, that's pretty much the only people they're gonna kill for the rest of the movie was that first few minutes.
Yeah.
I think this is the scene where there's like some really bad continuity.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there was some interview with Harrison Ford. He's like, listen, kid, if this is what's gonna cost us the movie, then we got bigger problems anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
But somewhere in this scene, the continuity is like way off. And Mark Hamill, I think, was concerned, and Harrison Ford's like, listen,
Yeah. I can't say
he's
I've
like,
ever noticed.
listen, let's forget about this goddamn scene. I gotta go bang Carrie Fisher while she does a line of coke off my cock. God knows what was going on behind the scenes in the 70s in these movie sets, man.
Yeah. Nobody knows.
Well, if you read her book, you'll know.
Yeah, true. Of course, she became a much more successful novelist than an actress in a way. She became a best-selling novelist, and one
With
of her
what?
books,
A novel?
well, oh, several novels.
I
The
know that.
first one was Postcards from the Edge, which was made
She wrote
into a
that?
movie.
I know that was a
Yeah,
movie. I didn't know that was a book, and I didn't know she wrote it.
yeah, it's sort of loosely based on her own life about an actress and her mother, and um,
Wasn't
you
like
know,
Glenn
she's
Close in that?
Meryl Streep, I
No,
believe.
Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep. And wasn't that one
Yeah,
of like Meryl Streep's like one of her like 80,000 Oscar nominations was in that movie?
it could be. It could
Yeah, it was
be.
Meryl Streep. Yeah, Paris
Yeah,
Carson,
it was a
Meryl
good
Streep.
movie, I recall.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, she sort of reinvented herself as a writer, did quite well.
Mhm. I'm trying to think how many Meryl Streep movies I've actually seen. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
No,
I'm sure there must have been one or two. Was she in Deer Hunter?
I don't remember. She's in
Hmm.
all kinds of things. She's in a Woody Allen movie.
I've seen a lot of Woody Allen movies, but yeah. I
Meryl
believe
Streep.
we did talk about her before on a different podcast about all the insane amount of Oscar nominations she's had, but
Yes.
you can't really name very many of her movies, you know?
Well, um, let's see. Manhattan. She was in Manhattan, the Woody
I'm not
Allen film,
100% sure. I think I might have seen Manhattan. I'm not sure. Because I,
and
I don't know if I saw Manhattan, honestly.
she was in The Deer Hunter.
I saw The
The
Dare
Wood-
Hunter, definitely.
Yeah. The Seduction of Joe Tynan.
No.
Kramer versus Kramer.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
She was really good in if I hope one of her Oscar wins was for that movie. That was such a good movie.
Yeah.
That was so good. Yeah, Kramer versus Kramer, I 100% saw
Yeah.
it, and she was great in that. And I
Yeah.
don't remember what her part was in a Deer Hunter, but I remember liking the Deer Hunter. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
It's been a long time since I've seen The Deer Hunter, but I remember liking it too.
and that was around the same time that this came out, right?
It was like the year after. Yeah. Deer
Oh,
Hunter
okay.
was the year after.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
See, you could see why people would like this because isn't Deer Hunter like a three and a half hour, 4 hour movie or something like that? And then
it's
you have
very
this,
long.
and it's a very serious and dramatic and emotional movie,
Yes,
and that's where you really,
it
I think
is.
that movie popularized Russian roulette, where you'd have the gun,
Yes.
the six shooter, and you just put one bullet in there and you just put it to your head and go back and forth. Like that scene's been emulated in a lot of movies. I think it really started or popularized with The Deer Hunter. But The Deer Hunter is an
Yes.
emotionally draining film. And that's what the 70s
Yes.
were all about, just like emotionally draining, complex, deep,
Yes.
thoughtful movies. And you get this
Yes.
little popcorn movie here that really like,
Yeah.
it's a relief.
Oh yeah. Totally. That's one thing Lucas said is what happened to all the fun movies, you know? He wanted to make something fun again. And he did. He succeeded at that, for sure. Um, Going back to the music for a second, I had the soundtrack, of course. I loved it, and I used to listen to that soundtrack all the time. But before I had the soundtrack, I actually had a single. It was like a 45 of the Star Wars theme, and it also had the what do they call it? The band that plays in the bar there, the Cantina band. It had that there as well, and it turns out that wasn't officially Star Wars. It was recorded by some artist called Meko or Miko, and it was like a number one single. It actually beat out the Star Wars soundtrack, which only made it up to number 10. Um, but they were both huge sellers, big, big, big platinum records. Um, so again, the music is just iconic.
Mm. That's a great vest that he has on, Harrison
Yeah,
Ford. Yeah.
you would wear that vest?
Oh my God, I would love that vest. It looks a little 70s though. It looks a little
Yeah,
70s. It's the only thing that looks a little 70s in this movie.
I guess part of what Lucas was trying to evoke was also old westerns. And
Mhm.
so perhaps that was meant to be the kind of vest a cowboy would have worn
Yeah.
in an old
I mean,
western.
Harrison Ford was kind of a cool guy back then. You had
Yeah.
this, you had the Indiana Jones movies and things like that.
Yes.
So, yeah. He was
It's
in a
funny to
lot of
think
big movies.
he was. Yeah. He became one of the most successful actors, like box
Who's
office
that
wise.
character that he played in all of those espionage films? Like the
Um,
uh, Jack
yeah.
Reacher, not Jack Reacher.
Well, I almost said that, but no. What is his
In
name?
like all the movies had generic titles from the novels, Patriot Games and
Yes.
like stuff like that.
Yes. Um, what was his name? Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan, yeah. That was another iconic character that he played was Jack Ryan.
Yeah.
Obviously Han Solo being number one, Indiana Jones being number two, but I'd say maybe Jack Ryan number three. And those are three
Yeah.
major franchises because I mean he did at least three movies. I know Patriot Games is one that comes to mind, but they were like all
Yes.
really generic titled movies from the books, but there were several of them.
Clear and Present Danger
Yeah, yeah,
was.
yeah.
Yeah. Totally. But yeah, he was definitely one of the biggest top grossing actors, and it's funny to think he almost gave it up and became a carpenter.
Well, he wanted to be Christ-like. You didn't like that one?
Say that again.
He wanted to be Christ-like.
Christ, like, oh, sorry.
The carpentry.
Yes, yeah, no, yeah. Okay. Yep.
Well, if I have to repeat it, it's not going to be as funny the second time. You got to
No,
get it the first time.
there's
It
too many
sounded funnier the
lasers.
first time if you would have got it the first time. It would
Too many lasers going off. I was distracted here.
have been funny.
But apparently, when he screened the film for his director friends, it was not finished. Like, none of the special effects were really done. And they think that's one of the problems why people didn't like it so much. And I think the lasers, they just had arrows drawn in where the lasers would be. And whenever there was a dogfight in outer space with the TIE fighters and the Millennium Falcon and that kind of stuff, he would just cut in old footage from World War II to sort of represent those fights.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of the people looking at it just went, "What is this? This is a mess. This is crazy." They couldn't imagine how it would look as good as it does.
Imagine seeing Alec Guinness in a sword fight without the music or like the lightsaber. It's just like an arrow or whatever you said was there. It would look
Yes.
so stupid.
Yeah,
I
that's
could see
true.
why they wouldn't like it. It's like, what the hell is this old guy like waving around this little
Yeah, that's true. Without the
even like
effects.
even with the lightsaber, with the music and the lightsaber, it's still like really bad, you know? If you really if you strip all this stuff away, it's
Yeah,
really silly.
yeah. This is sort of before the era of really super action movies where they would have a million cuts and they would make this look
Oh my
super
God.
awesome.
Imagine if this was done like 15 years ago. Like
Yeah.
when did all those old guy action movies really get popular with like Taken and stuff like that?
Ah, good question.
Because I
Um,
remember like there was one of the Taken sequels where what's his name was jumping over a fence. What's the guy that stars in them again?
Liam Neeson.
Where Liam Neeson was jumping over a fence and there were like a
Yeah.
hundred cuts just to get him over that fence.
Oh,
And he's
yes.
just like, it's the scene is so famous that like people just clip that scene and just put that scene on YouTube and like Twitter and everywhere. There's
Oh,
like a
yeah.
hundred cuts to get him over that fence, you know? It's like cut, 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 cut. And all that
Yeah.
just to get him from one side of the fence to the other. Because you know, goddamn well Liam Neeson ain't jumping a fence, however old he was when he was doing that movie.
Yeah.
But imagine how many
2008.
cuts it would take to make Alec Guinness look like a good sword fighter.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. Because essentially
2008.
all they're doing is just doing what we would do as kids, which is why people like
Yeah.
this, because it's like as a kid, you could have a sword fight just as good as this. All you're doing
Yeah.
is banging two sticks against each other. That's all they're doing. They're not really
That's right.
fighting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Totally.
I don't know if I saw my boss and he's like all intimidating and like you got to do this and you got to do that. Yeah, the force is with you, dark side. And then I see him fighting an old man like this. I'll be questioning my beliefs in the dark side. I'd be like,
Yeah.
the fool this is the fool we're following. You know, it's like he wants me to drink the Kool-Aid. I don't think so. You know, I could take him. He can't even take out this old guy.
Yeah.
He would lose so
Yeah.
much respect. You know,
Yeah. Those stormtroopers getting wiped out again.
ah, lambs for the slaughter.
Yeah. So I guess that could be one explanation for why
You know
people
what's
didn't believe
crazy
in it.
is that like there's like an emotional investment in this scene, right?
Yeah.
Because someone died on the good guy. But for that one
Yes.
good guy that died, how many stormtroopers died on the other side? You know, it's
That's
so
right.
disproportionate. The amount of
Yeah.
like, look at how sad they are for that one person that died. You think Darth
Yeah.
Vader is that sad for like the hundreds of stormtroopers he lost, and they're all sad because one old guy that was probably going to die of old age in a week or so anyway died on
Yeah.
their side.
That's right.
Uh,
And there was always that question there because he said, if you strike me down, you'll only make me stronger. And that always puzzled me as a kid, like what does that mean? And he just disappears at the end there. Is he now stronger? Is he still around?
he's with the Force now.
That's right. He's not a prisoner of this old body anymore.
Evidently.
Yeah,
Remember, this isn't sci-fi, it's fantasy, so
that's right.
we
Yes.
can't think with logic.
No.
So these are designed like like real jets, right? Like real, there were real fighter pilots.
I
This
think
is how
so.
they would operate, right?
I think so, yeah. And this would be where he would have spliced in World War II footage
Hmm.
when he screened the movie. And everybody said, "What the hell are we looking at?" But that could certainly be one reason why nobody believed in it. They couldn't they couldn't see it without the special effects.
Hmm.
And I think the music too is a good point. Without the music,
Dude, you
it makes
watch this
such a
movie
difference.
without the music, it would make a world of difference.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I was a kid seeing some making of feature and they showed you the scene without music and then they showed it with the music just to illustrate how good it was with the music. And it was one of these Star Wars scenes, and yeah, it just made a huge difference.
Yeah. I don't know why I was never that into that sci-fi as a kid. It just never did it for me. This and
No?
Star Trek, I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge Star Trek person. I do remember seeing some reruns of the show. And I did see the first couple of movies when they came out, but I wasn't an obsessive fan the way some people were and are.
I mean, if I had to pick one, I would pick this one because
Yeah.
Star Trek is just a bunch of people like standing in one room and then like pretending like, like they're being hit.
Yeah.
Just leaning
Yeah.
side to side, leaning on the right, leaning on the left. Oh, we're hit. Start leaning all over the place and moving the camera around. But it's just like people just standing in a room talking,
Yeah. Well, I think
pretending to
fans of
work on computers.
I think fans of Star Trek would say it's more serious. It's about serious issues. It's not just silly fun. It's a
Yeah,
more
they deal
serious
with
thing.
more they deal with more philosophical things,
Yeah.
because it's just a lot of like, and this is just about the action. So they're kind of the opposites from that standpoint. So I could
Yeah.
see why like they would clash,
Yeah.
because it's more a thought-provoking Star Trek, and this is
Yes.
more action and lore and fantasy
Yeah.
and real world politics. You'd have in Star Trek.
Yeah.
This really wouldn't address any of that stuff at all. This would
No.
address like religion and faith and stuff like that.
Yeah. So did you have any Star Wars toys or action figures when you were a kid?
What part of I don't like this shit don't you get?
Well, that doesn't mean someone might not have given you something and you would have had a toy or no,
No, no.
no.
I'm trying to
I
think what
did.
I liked as a kid. I
Yeah.
think I liked Knight Rider, which is kind of sci-fi-ish.
Knight Rider.
Yeah, I like that, right? I like the talking car and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I didn't have any of the toys. I'm
No.
probably like the only one that didn't have any of the toys. I did have like GI Joe toys and
Oh,
stuff.
yes.
So
Well, that's something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you have a toy collection? I'm
I
sorry, do
did.
you still have a toy collection and stuff?
Well, cleaning out my mother's house recently, I found a lot of my old Star Wars action figures and stuff like that. So I guess I do have them. Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, I had Star Wars figures, not a ton, but oddly enough, I had Greedo of all the characters. I had Greedo, the guy who Han Solo shoots in that
Mm.
cantina. I don't know why. Somebody must have given him to me, but he's like in the movie for like a minute or something. I have his action figure. But Kenner, the company that made the action figures, they they were not the first company pitched on it, and the other companies didn't want to go for it. They didn't see potential in this at all. So Kenner said, "Yeah, we'll do it. We'll make action figures and stuff." And so they signed a deal, but they weren't ready. The movie came out, and they didn't really expect it to do that well. they didn't even have stuff ready for the holiday season.
Mm.
So they wound up issuing these cardboard certificates so people could buy those, which would promise them an action figure because they just weren't ready. They were totally unprepared. Just nobody realized that Star
Imagine the
Wars was
amount
going
of
to be,
money they lost by not having those toys ready.
yeah, but of course
Money
they went on.
they're never gonna get back.
But even so, they made like $100 million or something. Like they went
Could have made
crazy, and
200 million.
oh, maybe, but it's just mind-boggling. Like even they didn't believe in it enough to rush the products out in time, so they didn't come out till 78. But yeah, they certainly became a big deal.
Imagine if that happened today, like an Avengers movie comes out, but you can't get any Avengers merchandise for a whole year later.
Yeah,
It's
I
crazy.
don't think that
That's a
I
lot of
don't
money
think
left on the table.
yeah. Well, I don't know if this is still the case, but I remember a few years back they talked about how when they decide to make a movie, they actually look at things like that. Can we make toys? Can we sell Happy Meals? Like if the movie doesn't provide them with all those options, they won't produce the movie.
Yeah,
So
that
I
happened
think,
to one of my childhood favorites, Batman.
oh
Like
yeah,
I loved Tim Burton's Batman, but he didn't sell enough toys.
yeah,
So they had to get rid of him because, the first one was unbelievable business, but the second one was too dark. So they're like, all right, we
yeah,
got to get rid of this guy. We're not selling enough toys. Like,
yeah,
McDonald's and all these people are mad at us because he's killing people in this Batman movie.
yeah.
So,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think they'd ever make that mistake again to not have the toys ready. But imagine if the movie flops, then you're stuck with all these toys that no one wants.
Yeah. I'm, I don't remember if Judge Dredd had a lot of toys, but I remember they were hoping that would be like a big franchise.
Yeah,
They put all their eggs in Stallone's basket. That's what they get for being that
yeah,
stupid anyway. But I remember that was being pushed as like a huge movie. But I don't know how
yeah.
much they lost with the toy aspect of it, or if toys were a big part of that.
No,
But yeah, I'm sure there've been a lot of movies that fell victim to that, thinking that it would
yeah,
be like a huge franchise type thing.
yeah.
Was it John Carter? Is it John Carter?
Yes, John Carter, Warlord of Mars.
Yeah.
Yes,
So evidently
yeah,
that's another one of the source materials that Star Wars took from. So Disney
yes,
said, "Hey, like, wait a minute, Lucas stole a bunch of ideas from John Carter. Let's do John Carter, and like we'll make a lot of money." I know they lost a lot of money in that one because no one saw John
yeah,
Carter.
yeah. Well, I have a friend who saw it, and he was a fan of the original books and whatnot, and he just said it was terrible. Like they just didn't understand it at all. So,
Well, what's crazy is that like Lucas ripped off John Carter, but John
mhm.
Carter seems so far after Star Wars. It's like, well, then what am I watching the Star Wars ripoff for? So
Yeah,
it's kind of funny that way.
that's true. Yeah. Of course, Star Wars, they had all kinds of things: novels, comics, video games, amusement
Cereals,
parks.
toilet
Yeah,
paper, you
yeah,
name
like
it, they'll put Star Wars on it.
yeah. I uh, I had Star Wars sheets and pillowcases.
For me, it was always Batman. I had Batman trading cards.
Yeah.
I had the Batman medallion,
Oh yes.
the T-shirt. So many Batman paraphernalia.
Yeah. So here we have R2D2 still involved in the climactic sequence of the film, as if he and C3PO are our main characters in a way.
Well, they started off the movie, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it kind of is about them in a way.
Yeah. I never liked I never found them funny. They seem like just
The
like,
droids?
yeah. And I'm not saying this is a derogatory way, but they just seem like an old like gay couple constantly bickering. And again, I'm not bringing up gay as
Yeah.
derogatory. I'm just using it as a descriptive, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely something that people have said about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's like they're just bickering, bickering, bickering. No one wants to see people like bicker. I just find their scenes to be cringy.
I always enjoyed them.
Because I mean, even the version of Hidden Fortress, I was like, God, that's why I don't like Hidden Fortress as much as other Kurosawa movies. Because
Oh yeah.
Kurosawa didn't really lean into comedy that much, you know?
Uh-huh.
He did it sometimes, but he didn't really like lean into it hard. At Hidden Fortress, he really leaned into comedy with those two characters that
Yeah.
C3PO and R2D2 are based on. So
Yeah.
I'm not into that slapstick stuff. It just doesn't do it
Uh-huh.
for me.
Well, that's fair enough.
Yeah, but it's crazy how these three movies and this one that started it off, so much was
Yes.
built off of these. Like, I haven't watched a lot of the Star Wars stuff that came out after. I've seen a couple of the recent movies. I didn't really care for them. And I
Yeah.
saw the first season of The Mandalorian.
Oh yeah.
I kind of lost interest as the season went on because it's really repetitive. It kind of
Okay.
reminded me of like one of those shows like The Incredible Hulk or Kung Fu, where like every week the hero would go into a new town, help out the locals, and then move on to another town,
Oh
help
yes.
out the locals, move
Yeah.
on to another town.
Yeah.
And it just felt like repetitive. It's like, all right, like
Okay.
what adventure are we getting into this week? What excuse are you going to have to not stay when everybody wants you there?
Yeah.
First they don't want you there. You're the outsider, get out of here. Then you do something that puts you on their side. Then there's this big issue they're having. You help them solve it. Then they're like, "Oh, please stay, please stay," and you're like, "No, my adventure continues." It's a formula. I mean, I just named two shows, but there's endless shows that use that formula,
Yeah.
and that was basically The Mandalorian, you know.
Okay.
And at first, it
I
was
did.
like like like
Yeah.
cool adventures, but then when you realize it was just this episodic thing that really wasn't going anywhere, I kind of lost interest.
Okay. I
Because
didn't
even in
know it
that
was.
first season, there were episodes that felt really similar because you can only make them so different
Yeah.
if you follow in the same formula.
Huh. I didn't know it was like that. One of my childhood favorites is a Canadian show called The Littlest Hobo, which was about a dog that would go town to town and help people out. So the same basic format, but it was a dog. So very familiar with that format.
Yeah, it's a popular one,
Yeah.
but yeah, like even just watching that and some of the movies, it's like it could be like a nothing character in one of these jet fighters that we're watching now. And if the actor is alive and he wasn't killed off, they'll bring him back in the show, give him all this huge backstory, and make him seem like some important character. And it's just kind of funny looking back on this movie now after seeing, episodes of The Mandalorian or in some of these newer movies and just realize that, yeah, it's just a low budget movie that this independent or low budget, director was doing. And it somehow spun into something else. And again, because it's such a shell of a movie where there isn't a lot of backstory there, you can then add the backstory you want and create these characters into what you want. But when you have like a well-defined character with a lot of nuance, you can't really do that. But again, you had a lot of films with nuances. You had 4-hour movies that had time to build up all the nuance you wanted, but
Yeah.
people were getting tired of that, in the late 70s going into the 80s.
Yeah. I suppose that's also one benefit of saying this is chapter four of an ongoing story. So he doesn't have to bother telling you all the backstory because it's all happened in episodes one, two, and three that we didn't see. So we're just dropped in the middle of this really exciting story where the stormtroopers are attacking the ship and we don't know what's going on, but it's really exciting to watch.
Yeah, you say you don't have well-developed characters. Well, I have plausible deniability. That's better than well-defined characters.
Yes. I guess it's no surprise that Star Wars was the top grossing movie at the box office in 1977.
Mhm.
It made way more money than anyone else, including Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
I
which
never
was
really
a
cared for
bigger.
that movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed it when I saw it, but I've never felt the need to see it again, really.
Yeah, I feel that way about a lot of Spielberg films.
Yeah,
I don't know, they just don't really do it for me.
but he, of course, had a massive success with Jaws, and he had quite a huge budget for Close Encounters. So it's interesting that he didn't make anywhere near as much money, although he was the number two box office hit of the year. Still nowhere near what Star Wars did.
I don't think Close Encounters was aiming for what, well, it's hard to say that Star Wars was aiming for something when,
Yeah,
we already established the fact that they didn't think it would be much, but I don't think it has the wide appeal that Star Wars has.
no,
Because again, it's a
no,
nuanced character.
yeah,
He has trouble with home, he leaves his family, and even Spielberg said he regretted that decision
oh
because he
yeah,
didn't have a family at the time, the fact that the character would leave his family. So
uh huh, yeah, that makes sense. So the number three movie was very different. It was Saturday Night Fever.
love that movie.
Yeah,
You can tell by the way I use my walk. Was made. No time to talk. God, I love that movie. I love that character too. Because
yeah,
he's not smart,
yeah,
but like they don't like make fun of him. It's not like, oh, he's a stupid character to look at this stupid character. No, he's our lead character, but he's
yeah,
so flawed. And then
yeah,
like the love interest isn't really a love interest because he likes her, but she doesn't like him in that way, and they don't really get together.
yeah,
Despite all the love songs and despite the fact that he's a handsome guy and the guy usually gets a girl, I like the fact that she just doesn't want him in that way, and they don't get together,
yeah,
even though they're like they form a somewhat of a friendship. And I love the fact that she thinks she's so smart because she's a little bit smarter than him, but she's also pretty much an idiot. That movie is so good on so many levels, man.
yeah.
It is so good.
Yeah, I avoided it for years because I just thought it was a disco movie, you know. When I
Mhm.
was young, I thought, why do I want to watch a disco movie? But it's so much more than that. It's much grittier. It is a good movie,
I love
definitely.
that movie. I love it.
Yeah,
I think it's my favorite Travolta movie. I'd have to
oh yeah,
watch that and Pulp Fiction, maybe in close vicinity.
yeah,
But off the top of my head, I would say I like it more than Pulp Fiction. I like it a lot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the number four movie was one that I loved as a kid, Smokey and the Bandit.
Nah, I, I can't fuck with you on that one, man. You're on your own there.
You saying you never saw it or you didn't like it?
I don't care for it. It's
Yeah,
like those Fast and Furious movies. It's the Fast
yeah,
and Furious of the 70s, I guess. Those car movies don't really do it for me.
yeah. Well, that's fair enough. But it's interesting. That's another movie like Star Wars, which is just kind of fun. It's not a very gritty movie. It's not a very realistic movie. It's just kind of meant to entertain you. And I guess it did.
And he was like, what's his name? Burt Reynolds. He was kind of like the big star of the day back then. We
Yeah.
talked about when we were reviewing, or doing commentary for Rocky 3 when we were getting into the Rocky character, that they didn't want him to play Rocky. And one of the people that they wanted was Burt Reynolds, because again, that's a 70s movie, again, that we were talking about 70s movies, that at the time, Burt Reynolds was the kind of the guy back then.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah. He was a big star. I loved him as a kid. I watched anything he was in. Smokey and the Bandit was right up there. Of course, when I was a kid, I was annoyed that Star Wars didn't win Best Picture at the Oscars.
Was it Annie
Uh,
Hall or something?
Yeah, Annie Hall, which of
Yeah,
course at the time I knew nothing about that and I had no interest in it. But years later, I discovered that, yeah, that is actually a very good movie. I
it's
really
really
like
good.
Annie Hall.
It's a really,
Yeah.
really good movie.
So
I
it
mean,
deserved the.
it
Oh,
deserved it.
yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's unfortunate now. So many people um, backlashing or whatever you want to call it on Woody Allen. It's
Mhm.
hard to talk about movies like that, but it is a
So
really
real
great movie.
quickly on Woody Allen, since you brought him up, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna say like people are wrong for not liking him or what he did wasn't creepy, but people forget that there are two things, and I'm kind of aware of this because I have a friend that went through a divorce,
Oh, yeah.
is that a lot of times the male in a divorce is always painted as the bad guy
Mm,
because women generally have more emotional investment into pursuing vendettas. Men
hmm.
by nature are just like they just rather let it go and move on. That's the man
Hmm.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Women are by nature they're more emotional. That's why they make better parents and mothers and whatever. So when it comes to like a bitter split and it's like something that may not 100% be true, a guy would be like, oh, fuck it, let me just let it go. And a woman
Yeah.
will keep pushing that narrative.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, for to be vindictive, a woman will say, like, oh, well, he abused the kid or he sexually touched
Hmm.
them in a certain way. And then they
Yeah.
will manipulate those kids who don't know any better, who are just caught up in a divorce. And
Yeah.
they were pointing that out at the time that this whole thing was going on. But over time, people forget that aspect that
Yeah.
it wasn't a given that people believed those allegations against Woody Allen at the time.
Yeah.
But over
Yeah.
time, that narrative just kept pushing towards Mira Farrow's direction, and everybody 100% that believed that Woody Allen molested his kids and whatever, whatever. And he doesn't help
Yeah.
his cause, the fact that he has a relationship with his adopted daughter.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not saying that Woody Allen's a good guy in this, but people forget that there's a balance to these things, much like the Force. There's a
Yeah.
balance. And,
That's
you know,
right.
sometimes like these narratives can be in time, they can be skewed. So for me, that's part of the reason why I just rather not get involved in that stuff. And
Yeah.
I just view him as a great filmmaker and I can enjoy his films without being sidetracked with all that narrative stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. The films should stand on their own, regardless of who made them or what he may have done or not done. Or the films should stand on their own. And I also agree that it's a dubious allegation. I mean, we don't know what the truth is, but it's
When you look at the numbers when divorces and how many women accuse their husbands of doing
mhm.
certain things, and it's like, man, so like every guy that goes through a divorce abuses his kids? That's kind of a weird statistic. You know, it's like the
Yeah.
numbers just don't add up, you know? The
Yeah.
math ain't mathin', as they say. So,
Yeah. Well, of course, the other thing too is I always look for a pattern of behavior, and
mhm.
this guy's only accused of one incident on one day, and there's never been any other. So that seems a little suspicious, right?
Yeah.
Usually, when somebody's accused, there'll be a lot of other people coming forward and a lot of other stories that'll come out, but there's nothing.
And the
So,
fact that he's still with her after all this time, you
yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah. He didn't move on to another young woman, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I suppose that's a conversation for a
For another
much
time, another
for
movie.
another time. Yeah.
Maybe if we do Annie Hall, we'll get
Yeah,
into that.
exactly. Yeah. Yes, because here we are at the grand finale of
And
Star
talk
Wars.
about like adding lore to like minor things. I believe this is a scene where Chewbacca doesn't get a medal, and they make
Yes.
such a big deal about Chewbacca getting the medal in like
Yeah.
one in the future movies. And there's like so many online theories and essays and like why
Yeah.
Chewbacca didn't get a medal, and it's just like, guys, come on, man,
Well, George Lucas said that Chewbacca was kind of based on his dog. So maybe he viewed Chewbacca as Han Solo's dog. And so you don't give a medal to the dog, you just give a medal to the owner.
You
I
give him
don't
a
know.
medal, a pat on the head to the
Yeah.
dog.
It could have thrown him a bone or something. I don't know. Um, yeah, a lot of people love
That
Chewbacca,
sounds
though.
like
A lot
something I would say. Stop stealing my
of.
lines. Let's cut that out and we're ready.
Okay.
You could have thrown him a bone or something.
Good one.
Hey, Peter
Yeah.
Cushing's name came up first, and Alec Guinness. Because I guess
Yeah,
those at the time were the bigger names, right? Peter Cushing,
they
Alec
were.
Guinness.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of these other guys, yeah, it was kind of their big break.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. I mean, even Harrison Ford, who would go on a huge success at this time, he was basically unknown.
Mm.
So, yeah, they were the big stars.
Yeah, this was fun. This was fun, man. I know we
Yeah.
didn't talk a lot about the movie
No,
during this podcast, but what are you going to say about the movie that people don't know already?
that's right. I mean, everybody
So
knows it. Everybody loves it. Well, everybody should love it, but
yeah.
it's yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies. Some people have seen it hundreds of times. I haven't seen it that many, but I've probably seen it a dozen,
Mhm.
so it's um it's a movie I'll always be able to enjoy. It fills me with great nostalgia, and I do think it works. I think it is a good movie. It's very good at what it is.
Mhm. Yeah, and I agree. While I don't love it as much as some of the rabid fans, I still think it's great. I mean, it's a really,
Yeah.
really good movie. It's hard to find a lot of flaws. Obviously, there are some flaws, the ones that, um, people like Harrison Ford to say, "Hey, listen, kid, you worried about that? You worried about the wrong thing." You know,
That's right.
you do have Carrie Fisher who, gains and loses a British accent scene to scene. You have stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I mean, when you look at the big picture, I mean, especially for the budget and the fact that a lot of people didn't believe him, this is a great
Yeah.
accomplishment as far as like historically, as far as films go. Like this is a great accomplishment that Lucas did. You look at what this
Yeah.
spawned, it spawned a franchise that influenced and inspired generations of filmmakers to come, and it
Oh yeah.
made him a billionaire and
Yeah.
it's a really good film, you know.
Yeah. Totally. And it's still amazing to me that he chose not to go to the premiere because he did not believe in it enough. He was afraid it was going to fail. I mean, that's serious to not go to the premiere. Like usually you would just go and suffer at the back of the room, but he didn't go. He went to Hawaii. So even he wasn't convinced. But thankfully he was wrong. Thankfully everybody was wrong. Although oddly enough, some of the studio people were actually believers in the movie, which is
What,
switch.
the
It's
people whose
usually
jobs were on the line?
well, I don't know, but usually it's the artists who believe in it, and the studio people are like, no, no, this is no good. We got to change it. But but in this case, Alan Ladd Jr. was one of the executives, and he believed in it.
Is he the son of Alan Ladd, the actor?
I assume he must be. I assume so.
Oh.
Yeah. But he believed in it, even though it kind of had a disastrous screening, and the other, filmmakers didn't think much of it. And Spielberg was the only one of them who said he thought it had potential. He could look
But
past.
Spielberg is his good friend, though.
That's
They went
true.
on to do like Indiana
That's
Jones together, so maybe
totally.
he was
And
just being a friend.
they went to Hawaii together. That's who he was with in Hawaii. But so yeah, was Spielberg simply being supportive and a good friend, or did he actually see potential in it? Hard to know, but that's what he said, though. He said it had potential, it needed to finish the effects, but the other filmmakers were just like, what the hell? They didn't get it. So thankfully, all those people were wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so we will wrap this up here and we will see you guys with the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, looking forward to that.